So after some coercion from my homie Johnny, recently I found myself with an Ender V3. And honestly, about time. It seems like everybody and their mother has a 3D printer nowadays. But he didn't just set me up with the printer, he also set me on a bit of a HiT era kick. That being after he finished his blue wagons of the same era. So when I got my own 3D printer, I soon found myself asking the inevitable question. What was I gonna make first? I knew I wanted to make a replica, but I figured starting with an engine probably wouldn't be smart. What's something small and pretty simplistic that would be an easy first project? Oh. Yeah, that'll do. So, before anything, these files come from and are made by Jamos Trains. So, huge thank you and shout out to him for making this possible. And since the files he has are public, work started pretty quickly. The only issue I really ran into was the Ender 3 itself, which pretty easily gave me wheels, axle boxes, brakes, even a base. But a body and buffers, no sir. So after days of constant releveling and failed prints and just a lot of frustration, it worked. And soon I was putting the entire thing together. I would prime the model twice over, once with a base coat to find any imperfections, and a second time with a black primer once it was sanded, and then sprayed it again with the gray one because it looked cool, oops. Since this truck is predominantly wood, I left some of the print lines for added realism, and pretty quickly after this would apply the red spray paint. But before we get into that, let's talk about the buffers and couplings. So initially I had a lot of trouble printing the buffers themselves. The housings would come out fine, but the buffer heads were honestly terrible. So to get around this, I would only print the buffer housings themselves, while the heads were instead sourced from a spare G-scale model. The chains are normal hobby chains which you can find at any Walmart or craft store, and at the moment are actually too small to be used in, well, normal use. Expect this to change with time, but for now I couldn't leave him without them. And since this seems like a good time and we're kinda on the subject, currently the wagon uses wooden rods for axles, specifically a 3mm size. And for anyone looking to replicate this, be warned this took a lot of trial and error. Even now he's not the smoothest roller, so over time I'll work on that too. But getting into the painting of the model, once the entire thing was primed over, I sprayed it the same red as I sprayed the Audrey James model, that being Rust-Oleum's Gloss Apple Red, and gave this about 2 or 3 coats along the entire model to make sure the red was really there. Following this, I decided to hand paint the smaller details black as well as the entire undercarriage. Honestly not being the most mindful since a little bit before this I decided I would weather it. And to weather this guy, I would go back to some classic TrainBoy methods. Once this was dry, it was time to bust out the spray paint. And from a distance gave it several bursts of black to simulate coal dust. This was done several times over until I was satisfied, and following this the wheels were spray painted silver and weathered as well. Lastly came the load, which I experimented with a little bit before, and essentially is a small cardboard box with a piece of green cloth on top of it. I really enjoyed the look of this and decided to bring it into the final model. And using the same chains I used for the couplers made a way to hold that tarp down. And following this, the only thing left to do was weather that same tarp. And following this, the replica was pretty much complete. So ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our glamour shots. Really quick, I want to give a huge thank you again to Jamos for making these files public and this project possible, and another thank you to the homie Tank Engine John for helping me with this entire process, and dealing with my constant 3D printer questions, which I know for a fact got annoying. For anyone who wants to start making replicas themselves, I highly recommend you start with something like a 7-plank like I did. Not only does Jamos have these files public, but it's pretty simple and won't use a lot of plastic. So on the chance anything goes wrong, it won't be too big of an L. But all of that aside, hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing how I made my first replica, and hopefully have some tips should you want to do the same. As always, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons, and on the chance you enjoyed what you see, be sure to subscribe since there's always more stuff on the way. As always guys, thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.